This is the Bells of Steel Manticore, their top-of-the-line power rack. It's 3 inches by 3 inches with 1-inch holes in hardware, and it's got these unique and innovative keyholes on the side. And this is the Rogue Monster Power Rack. It's also 3 inches by 3 inches with 1-inch holes, and it's got these keyholes on the side. Wait, what? This is the best power rack Bells has ever made, and the similarities are intentional as they're going directly at Rogue. So we've loaded it up with every attachment they make, put them side by side, and are going to break down just how close these two are to see if this competes with the king of home gym power racks. But if you think they're identical, you'd be wrong. Let me show you something. The numbers on the Bells rack start lower and go higher. Completely different. Obviously, I'm having a little fun with this one, but there are some important differences between the two that we'll cover. Price being one, as the Manticore is much less expensive, but there's also subtle variations in the racks and huge differences in the attachments. So as we talk about compatibility between the two and the various accessories, I should warn you now, it's a bit of a good, bad, and the ugly situation. So you're going to want to watch the entire video because we're in for a bit of a ride as we compare these two. If you're looking at these clips thinking, why is the Manticore in a completely different configuration? Well, that's because I thought it'd be a really great idea to put them like this for the video, and then I realized can't actually use them like this. Not that it hasn't been fun trying, but it does demonstrate the real power of a 3x3 rack. Modularity. 3x3 racks, as long as it's a quality rack, at their cores, all basically do the same thing. Well, unless your wife is asking. So your decision making is probably going to come down to price and which ecosystem you want to be in, because it's a 3x3 rack's ability to be added onto. That's their biggest selling point. 10 feet away from me is my 11-post Frankenstein Rep Rogue rack, a perfect example. I'm going to simplify this a little bit and break your choices down to help you see if this or another rack is right for you. If you decide any of these racks sound good, we've reviewed them all, so check out our other videos. And if you're feeling generous, please use our affiliate links that are in the description, because if you make a purchase, the company will send us a small commission at no cost to you, which is how we fund this channel. All right, to simplify things, I'm going to break this down into two categories. One is metric versus American. And even though this is an imported rack, it's made to American specs. So this is 3-inch by 3-inch tubing with 1-inch holes and 2-inch hole spacing. These racks are so similar in specs that I'm lumping the Manticore in when I talk about American racks. And two, there's 1-inch holes in hardware versus 5/8, which we'll get to when we talk about the various attachments, and that's where things get a little bit exciting. If you pick a metric rack, that's your Rep PR 5000s, Titan series, and so on, you're essentially choosing to live in their world. Sure, you could make a Rogue drop-in Rhino fit on a Rep PR 5000, but you're swapping so many cross members, it basically ends up that the rack is half Rep, half Rogue. You can, of course, swap some attachments between metric and American, but you're not putting an Aries on an American rack. There's just too many small differences in measurements to make it work. For example, metric racks aren't actually 3 inches by 3 inches like these are. They're a little bit smaller. So if I put my Bells of Steel seal row pad on my Rep PR 5000, it'll be a little loose, but it does work. I can also put metric spotter arms on an American rack, but things can get a little tight and uncomfortable when you're trying to fit them where they don't really belong, so you may have to sand them to make it fit. Where it doesn't work is if you have a second pin that locks the attachment in, because the hole spacing on a metric rack isn't actually 2 inches. Again, it's a little bit less. Oh, and don't forget that American racks are wider at 49 inches to the outside versus 47, which can affect how bars, specifically specialty bars, fit. as well as other things. So I'd look at what a company is offering and their innovations. You've got Rep with the Adonis, there's the Aries, and of course the Athena. You get the idea. And Rogue with the Rhino, Slinger, Lat, and Low Row combo, and a chalk bowl that cost $100 shipped. I'm picking on Rogue a bit there, but it showed you the power move Bells has made, because whereas Rep has been killing the innovation side of things, Rogue really hasn't kept up. Well, make a rack that's less expensive, directly compatible, and launch it with a slew of attachments, some of which Rogue doesn't offer, but also develop a ton of others we've been asking Rogue for years. Well, that investment, listening to feedback, and compatibility between the two really makes the Manticore a lot more tempting. All right, what about the actual attachments? This is where the good, bad, and the ugly comes in. Now, I'm not saying everything is gonna fit perfectly. I don't want that liability, but I'm telling you in the clearest way possible, Bells, I'm sorry for the potential lawsuit here, but the Manticore is a near identical copy of Rogue's monster rack, except with the accessories, because those are in completely different leagues, both in price and quality. But that's a lot of the appeal of this rack. I can easily swap things between. So I think it makes sense for me to go maybe a little overboard when talking about attachments here, but if I do miss something and you want me to go even more in depth, then let me know in the comments and I can make dedicated reviews on any of these attachments. Let's start with the good and then make our way to the ugly before we get to some more of the good. Kind of like when somebody comments that I make really great reviews, but they can't stand my voice or personality, but hey, at least they like my wife. As a generalization, much of the appeal of Bells attachments is going to be the often drastic savings over Rogue. And most of these, I will admit, are pretty well done. So if we look at the standard J-Cups, these are $80 and Rogues cost about twice that. But I actually prefer these because they have UHMW on all contact points of the barbell and Rogues don't, which is to me just a stupid cost-saving measure. Not that I don't love when my barbell literally grinds into the metal on them. If you step it up to sandwich J-Cups, that's where you start seeing that big quality difference. Yes, they do cost twice as much, but if you want that classic Rogue overbuilt quality, these are twice the cup. Not that your wife or barbell's really gonna know the difference. Now the Bells cups are nice. Oh, forgot that they added this little plug that goes in the hole on the back side. But actually these mag pins, which I clearly have a logical amount because they come with every attachment, they're a nice upgrade over the flag style pin that the Hydra has. That is, unless you enjoy stabbing yourself as you constantly walk into them. These are pretty decent sandwich J-Cups and they're very well priced, but they should have extended the UHMW another 1/4 of an inch to provide barbell protection on all sides, which is the same thing I said in our Hydra rack review. But at least they listened and added UHMW on all contact surfaces with the power rack across all of the attachments, unlike on the Hydra rack where it's kind of inconsistently done, so now you're not going to scuff up your rack as easily. Other attachments Bells has done a really good job with are their strap and flip down safeties. Admittedly, I like these straps a lot because of how much I dislike adjusting Rogues. They're just clunky and slow. Sure, these are going to fit a little loose on the rack, but Bells has never been known for tight tolerances, and when it comes down to it, these are much cheaper, well done, and are going to keep you safe. Their flip downs though, these things are fantastic. I would pick these over Rogues because, well, one, they're literally half the price, but even if that wasn't the case, Rogue still doesn't make these for a 30-inch rack. So I've been literally waiting for these for years, and they are very well made, rock solid, and probably rival the Seal Row pad as my favorite attachment Bells makes. The only thing I question on them is the inclusion of the keyholes, because I'm not really sure what functionality that adds. And that's because outside of Rogue's plate storage pins and keyhole gun rack, they've never really done much with them. So I don't know, maybe Bells has something up their sleeve there. Now, this one might be nitpicking, but I also debate why they're using glossy UHMW on all of their attachments, because as you can maybe see on the spotter arms, once you get barbell contact with them, they end up looking really chewed up. Whereas if you use something like the textured style of surplus strength spotter arms that have been through months and months of pin presses and bench press, those look much better. Speaking of the spotter arms, let's get to the bad, and I apologize if I get a little heated here. So before I get too far, I'll say this. All the attachments are functional, and many of them are very good. But this is a good example of the advantage a 1-inch rack has over 5/8. The massive 1-inch pins are able to support a lot more weight. So you don't need a large mount for the attachment. And we all know how important every inch is, but someone forgot to tell that to Bells, because these things are huge, and that becomes an issue for things like rack poles because it limits where they can be mounted on the rack. But they're not bad. I'm just getting a little warmed up. It becomes a much larger issue with things like their landmine and leg rollers. Listen, clearly they did some research when designing the rack, so why don't, I don't know, look at rep, surplus strength, or maybe this is gonna sound a little crazy, even Rogue's leg rollers? The mount isn't needed, so it's larger and more expensive than it needs to be, and I'd also rank it below all those in quality. Surplus strength is the gold standard, then Rogue, then Rep, which is actually the cheapest one, so I'd avoid it. Now, if you thought I was mean to the rollers, get ready for how much I don't like this landmine. This is the ugly. You've got the same mount as the rollers, but whereas it was manageable before, here it's a disaster because the size of this thing limits where it can be placed on your rack. So you either got it a foot in the air or on a cross member where it's really not meant to rotate that way. I tested probably a dozen placements and tried to give them the benefit of the doubt, but the fact that they seem to be trying to hide the mount in half the pics on their listing makes me think otherwise. And since I'm on a roll of picking on Bells, let's talk about the lever arms. And yes, I mean the fact that I'm pretty sure they have the mount upside down in their listing, but I followed their pictures when I first built it, so what do I know? I'm actually not a big lever arm fan. I find them heavy, awkward, and slow to set up. So take my thoughts with a grain of salt. Outside of me not liking jammer arms, these work, and you can get creative and come up with tons of ways to use them. And with 2 handle options or the ability to buy them without handles, I know you creative types will come up with all kinds of crazy ideas, but Winnie already kind of thinks I spend too much time in here tinkering, and they're just expensive for what you get. All right, I've done enough damage for one video. Thanks, Bells, for sending me this for free for the review. So let's get back to what they've done well. The lat and low row is largely unchanged from the Hydra version we reviewed, except of course now they make a selectorized version along with the plate-loaded one. Both have the same 1-to-1 ratio, pull smoothly, and work well. I do think they should come standard with their upgraded lat bar and literally any other row handle, because the 2 it comes with are pretty bad quality, but you can attach anything to the carabiners, and we've used this for upright pulls and a lot of other movements. The weight stack version comes with 210 pounds of plates, but you'll notice they kept the weight horns on there so I can max out my curls, and both versions have a 500-pound weight capacity, and with the integrated band pegs, I don't see anyone maxing this thing out. Now, I've already shown you 2 possible builds, but it is a 3x3 rack, so you can really go crazy, and I think Bells has done a great job giving you a ton of choices, so you're able to configure it to your situation. You've got 4 height options, various rack depths, a few different pull-up bars, and between folding racks, squat stands, collegiate half racks, and with quite a few others, they already compete and might actually be ahead of Rogue on options. Of course, with only one finish option currently, this black powder coat, which is pretty cleanly applied, but they're nowhere near Rogue's 12 finishes, and Rogue has a better build quality both in the rack and the attachments. Overall though, the Manticore is very well done. It's beyond stable, and robots are cutting and welding both these up, so you'll see a lot of similarities. They're both using 11 gauge steel and have the same 1,000 pound weight capacity and are more than enough for any home gym. But if you're looking for the finer touches like Rogue's flush mounted cross members, it's going to be hard to stand up to this American made quality. Of course, the counter to that is the price, which makes sense since the Manticore is imported. If you compare these two 6-post racks without all the extras, the difference ends up being over $1,200. And even at their simplest, squat stands, they're still a few $100s apart. I realize I didn't get to the 37 different ways to store plates, and I've completely missed the leg extension and leg curl, which I've got a lot of thoughts on. So if you want a separate review of that, since we've got the Hydra version, or even want it compared to the Isolator by Bulletproof Fitness, then let me know. Same thing goes for any of the other attachments Bells has or will be making for their 3x3 racks. Tell us what you want to see, and we'll do our best to make it happen. Thanks to our Patrons, links in the description. Hope this video was helpful. I'll see you next week.